All right, I think we should start now. I'm sure people will be joining later on, but they can play catch up. So hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar of how you can do more with your Microsoft environment through Echo Security. This is Echo UK's first event of the year, but certainly will not be the last. We'll have sessions throughout this year covering other security technologies. As we know, everyone's security journey is different. We'll also have sessions covering other security technologies, as well as other technologies of how you can do more around SQL and artificial intelligence. So please keep your eyes peeled for those. Now onto the housekeeping. Lovely. If you can just click on the slides, Paul. Yeah. So before we jump into today's presentation and I hand you over to our speakers, I just have a bit of housekeeping to run through. So firstly, feel free to screenshot any slides you think are relevant throughout today's webinar. But that being said, we will be recording this session and I'll be sending out the recording this afternoon. So make sure you have your eyes on your inbox. Now, a quick introduction to our team. So my name is Jana Malkoch. I'm a business development consultant for the UK subsidiary, and I will be your host. With me today, I have Rob Robinson. Oh, is there a slight delay in the slides? Can everyone see the housekeeping slides okay?
Yes.
Yep, all good. All right. Yeah, so with me today, I have Rob Robinson, who's our technical architect, Jonathan Treyers, who is our managed security services director, and last and definitely not least, Paul Hogan, who's looking after our managed detection response services. So quick fun fact, all three of these individuals have a combined lifetime of experience in the space. So collectively over 80 years of being in this field. I just want to iterate one final thing. We invite your comments and questions throughout this webinar. As I've mentioned, our speakers have seen it all and can hopefully answer it all. So if you have any questions, just pop them into the Teams chat and we'll go through them at the end. There'll also be a couple of polls and questions throughout this session, so make sure you leave your responses to those as well. We want this session to be as collaborative as it can be, so we want full engagement. And to finish the session off, there will be a short survey at the end, so please do leave us your feedback. This will help us improve future sessions like this, so you, the attendees, can get the most out of this experience. Now let's go to the agenda. All right, fantastic. So in today's session, just to give you all a summary, we'll start by providing you an overview of Echo and helping you understand our identity and context and how we can fit into your specific security environment. Following that, we'll delve into a typical attack and response scenario, outlining the steps our team takes to minimize that triage time and enhance your security standing through the Microsoft platform. And then lastly, we'll dive into a detailed discussion of our security services that we offer and the associated licenses, finishing it all off with a Q&A. All right, so you might be asking yourselves, why Echo, right? And one of the key areas that I talk around with all my customers is that we're one of Europe's leading managed service providers. Johnny will go into this in a bit more detail, but we've been featured in this award called Deloitte Fast 50 for 4 years in a row now. And that's essentially an award for the fastest growing tech companies in the UK. We've also been awarded Microsoft Rising Star for security, as we've covered all 4 areas of security. So this includes information and governance for all your compliance needs, IAM, so identity and access management, security optimization, which is all around extended detection response, and finally, threat intelligence. So we have a bird's eye view across your entire environment. But I think we can dive deeper into what this all really means, right? So the first point is all around our specialists. So we've got specialists covering all areas of IT and security with end-to-end coverage. And there's a key reason for how we're able to do this. Echo is made up of 24 strategic acquisitions where we have specialists in hot and niche areas of technologies. So one example that I can think on top of my head is an individual in our team who's been leading the AI space for close to 20 long years. And to really give you a broader scope of what all of this really means, around close to 70% of our employees are technical, and being technology-led will keep you reassured that you're in the right hands when you do think to transform your organization, both from a security and cloud point of view. Next, we have built close collaborations amongst our customer base in Ireland and Netherlands, as well as the UK, and have operations that span from the east to the western parts of the world to make sure you're able to have 24/7 support for any managed service your organization feels to opt in for. And then finally, we want you to be the drivers of your journey. So if there are any missions and goals that your team have for the next 6 months, year, 3 years, or even 5 years, we'll provide you good, better, and best practices to execute it in a proficient manner. However, if you do need help steering, we can also be a source of information around certain emerging technologies, cough, cough, Copilot, and we can educate you on this and cater it towards your specific organization's needs. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, I want this session to be full of collaboration. So I'm going to start it off with this poll. So the first poll that Paige will be putting up is, do you have a 24/7 security operations center right now? So quick yes or no. And then my colleague Jonathan Treyers will go into exactly what a 24/7 SOC looks like.
Great, perfect. Just thanks, Paul. We might move on to the next slide, and just while we can see in the background, I think Paige just kind of get a viewpoint of what the kind of numbers are there. Okay, right. So we probably have a 50-50 kind of split at the moment, but what we'll do though, I think that'll be really helpful as we move forward and give you an explanation of the security controls and the managed services throughout today. Look, but firstly, look, this webinar is all around Microsoft security. So I wanted to cover off kind of 4 key points in terms of why Echo and why are we here talking to our Microsoft. I think the first kind of key point is around our global SOC operations. We've one SOC based in Ireland, the UK, and Malaysia. And out of these SOCs, we operate 50,000 plus event alerts analyzed per month. And why Microsoft in this case? I think the key element would be is that our SOC is underpinned in most cases with Microsoft technology stacks. So it enables us to provide threat detection and response to our customers. The second element, and I think Kano kind of went into this already, was specifically around our solution partners designations. And we have all 4 security specializations. And why that is important is that it's not just a badge, right? Every year we have to show and demonstrate to Microsoft that we have the right level of training and certifications within the team. We have delivered expertise and solutions for our customers in these areas, and we have to prove to that, and our customer have to attest that we have done it. So not only do you have to do it, but you have to prove to Microsoft. And again, we already mentioned, and I'll just touch off it, we were the winner of the Partner of the Year Awards for a Rising Star in Security last year, which really recognized our work that we're doing. But I think on top of it all, and I think what we're getting into today is what everyone wants to hear. What are the practical solutions you can do more with your licensing? And we'll go into that in more detail. And I think a key aspect that we've done already, we've co-written the National Cybersecurity Center's framework for secure configuration of Microsoft 365. And within that framework, we clearly defined 4 levels of control levels that you can get to. Everything from foundational to advanced, optimized, and inside that, it kind of builds upon it with your licenses. So you can do more with whatever licenses you have, and it really shows you what your controls do and the threats it tries to mitigate. Paul, do you want to just move on to the next one there, right? Thanks. And before we get into the deep solutions of Microsoft and your threats, we just wanted to touch off at a high level, right? What our customers are looking for today, right? As an organization, we're very much outcome driven, and our customers at the moment are looking for solutions that help predict, prevent, detect, and respond to threats. And on front of us here, you can see how our managed service portfolio fits together in a layered approach. And where it is we try to help our customers know what the attack surface look like, prevent and protection controls, and then finally the managed and threat detection that builds upon the solutions that you have. The interesting fact is that over the last 12 months, we're seeing a lot more interest from our customers within the CTI and vulnerability management, or the attack surface management perspective. When beforehand, it was very much around having the ability to respond in terms of detect it and a managed detection and response. And finally, then an incident response retainer that can be drawn upon when required. But most of these solutions, when we speak about Microsoft, there is inbuilt features that you can leverage within your license stack. So for example, Microsoft have built in their threat intelligence. On top of that, they have the new vulnerability management that's maturing at the moment. And then finally, we can see to the right-hand side, the Defender stack, or between the protection and detection. The Defender stack has definitely matured, and it's the top right-hand quadrant of the Gartner quadrants. So I think we'll definitely be able to explore more of these throughout the webinar. Kane, do you want to move forward there again? Thanks. And right, so now let's get into the detail, and I'd like to start with another poll here to be able to understand the threats you're facing, right? So it should pop up on the screen any minute now. Just Paige, can I just confirm that's up, or can anyone else see the poll yet?
Sorry, slight delay. There you go.
And no worries at all. So look, there's three aspects there. There's identity theft, ransomware, or supply chain attacks. And while we're waiting, we can move forward, right? Just keep moving, and maybe someone can tell me the results of the poll.
Yeah, sure. Ransomware 54%, identity theft 38%, and supply chain 14% so far.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Let's continue on, right? And I think it's an interesting point, and because we explored that a little bit further. And the answer in this case is probably identity, but a cause of that answer is ransomware, which is the biggest impact, right? And if we look at over 36% of intrusions observed by IBM X-Force linked to compromised credentials, so therefore identity compromise. And if we look at what we're seeing in the market right now, or even sorry, in the globe, there's probably two different attack vectors. There's one attacker that comes in and utilizes a phishing email, redirect pages there, and they have an adversary in the middle attack to get your either credentials and or your session cookies. And from that there, either one or two things happen. Is that attacker utilize them to be able to breach your network, or B, they just literally sell them on the dark web. And we can see now in terms of some articles outlined that they sell for as little as 50 cents per user accounts. And then moving forward to that, then that's where the biggest impacts that you'd have on an organization. Either someone utilizes that to gain access to your network, they either read your emails from there, set up a business email campaign, which has potential financial and or reputational damages to your organization. Or the other attack vector that can typically be gained from that is someone gets into your network, moves laterally, and then deploys ransomware, which has significant operational impacts. And that's essentially what we're going to be covering over the next couple of slides, is how your controls can stop the initial attack vector in terms of phishing and also move to ransomware. And we're going to deep dive in on the Microsoft elements that work in this area, in line with what licenses you might have. And just a kind of final thought before I put on to Rob, is there's a lot you can do without significant financial costs. Within your control, there's a lot of Microsoft controls out there that can be utilized to help increase your maturity quite easily. So, Rob, I think if you want to take that forward.
Yep. Yeah. So, good morning, everybody. Yeah. So, current landscape, which is ever evolving, getting more sophisticated and more organised by the threat actors. So, I think, as the poll sort of suggested, human operator ransomware seems to be a key concern. This is not going away. In fact, the numbers of victims are increasing and it's becoming more automated. and the speed of execution has dropped significantly. So if you look at the bottom left there, you know, in 2019, the average days of execution, you know, of somebody gaining access, doing their reconnaissance, exfiltrating data and then dropping the payload was 60 days. And now is, you know, down to a really short period of 4 days, you know, which says there's a lot of automation going on there and a lot of sophistication to be able to do that within a 4-day period. So that is a pretty scary stat, I would suggest. You know, obviously these gangs now are up to triple extortion. The original sort of ransomware gangs was just encryption and ask for money. Then it was encryption and exfiltrate some data, and now the third revision is to actually publish data. And I think, you know, stats will sort of back up the point that victims are more likely to pay when data actually hits the public internet. You know, and generative AI will lead to more advanced attacks in this area. You know, we've been involved with a number of attacks over probably that period, 5-6 years. They've all started at the weekend or very, very early hours of the morning, you know, which is no coincidence, you know, when people are not at their desks or not being sort of fully covered. You know, and these things are not pleasant experiences. Certainly ones we've been involved in, you know, when there's no incident plan or there's been no testing of that plan, you know, typically chaos ensues. These always lead to the technical teams having to run at a 24/7 pace to get in the recovery phase to try and get systems back up. And we've also seen one company that we were called into get into some, you know, pretty nasty arguments between the sort of technical teams that were not 100% sure all the vulnerability and holes were blocked, and then the C-suite insisting that finance systems are switched on, you know, regardless of the risks, as they needed to invoice. So again, these things are not pleasant, believe me. So it's the last thing you want to be involved in. And one of the victims we work with as well actually took 6 weeks to recover core systems back online. So they were down for 6 weeks, which, you know, is a long time for a business to be down. You know, I've got a tool that I use, SOC Radar, which is a dark web sort of scanning tool, and I look on that every day. And, you know, typically there's 2 to 3 new identified ransomware victims just in the UK alone, let alone the sort of US and the rest of Europe. You know, business email compromise, again, look at the number in the bottom right there. 94% of organizations have fell victim to phishing attacks in the last year or so, up from 92% on the previous year. So again, these things are getting more sophisticated. You know, the top 3 attacks now are malicious URLs, rather than, you know, back in the day it was a bit more attachments, whereas now they know the attachments are going to get more scanned, but the malicious URLs is certainly the number one attack. As I say, with the malware attachments, and then attacks sent from compromised accounts. So, and then this was a bit of an interesting one. So the top 3 data loss incidents: reckless behavior to get the job done, you know, installing non-approved software, accessing non-approved data sources and GPT AI type services, human error. You know, and whilst you get online protection as part of Defender for Office P1, you know, we would always recommend a multi-layered approach on your email, because it is the number one way that people are trying to attack you. Also, technologies like DKIM, SPF, and DMARC should also be implemented within your email and your DNS setup. You know, becoming more common now is the, you know, adversary and the middle type attacks, and they're characterized by active engagement, going beyond the passive sort of eavesdropping to actively manipulate data and comms. You know, typically this is credential harvesting, data manipulation, eavesdropping, spoofing, and malware delivery. You know, so I think from this, the key message from me here is, you know, having a 24/7 early detection and response capabilities is now essential to all businesses in the protection against these current threats, you know. Okay. Just move on.
Thanks, Rob, for that. Look, what I'm going to do now is just take a look at an attack, what it looks like, and which of the Microsoft products that you have already may be able to help you defend against those attacks, and then the kind of services that our SOC implement in conjunction with those products to try and mitigate an attack as well. So we'll start off with something like this. Happens before an attack even happens. The threat actors will do some level of reconnaissance. What does that mean? They're trying to probe your environment for weaknesses. They could be weaknesses in terms of open ports, unpatched devices on the edge, etc. So how we get to mitigate something like this is through, and Johnny mentioned earlier on, some of those cyber threat intelligence services. And if you're looking specifically at the Microsoft stack, there is a product called Defender External Attack Surface Management. And effectively what that is doing is having that continuous look at what you look like from an attacker's perspective. What kind of attack surface are you exhibiting? What are the vulnerabilities with that? So that you can then patch and remediate them. Sometimes it's patching, sometimes it's configuration change to ensure that you're presenting yourself a much smaller target to the attackers. As well as that, we do have cyber threat intelligence services, as Rob's mentioned, and Johnny's mentioned, using threat intelligence from curated partners such as Recorded Future and SOC Radar as well. Okay, so we'll take it that the attacker has found a vulnerability. In this case, it happens to be a machine with RDP access that's on the boundary. This relates to a specific action attack that Microsoft dealt with. So this started around 8 a.m. Actors got access onto this device. They then look to see like, what can we do here? So they tested out, let's drop a piece of ransomware. So the Lockbit payload is a piece of ransomware that you may be familiar with. Exactly at this time, they tried to drop that onto the machine, and what happened? And this is where the first Microsoft product kind of kicks in. This is Defender for Endpoint, or really this is the basic part of the Defender Endpoint, the antivirus. So you may know it as MDAV, Microsoft Defender Antivirus. Effectively, this is the endpoint protection piece of Microsoft Defender. We're going to talk a little bit more later on around the detect and respond piece, but here we're just talking about that very, very basic endpoint protection piece. So what did that do? That blocked access, blocked the deployment of that piece of ransomware. In fact, when you look at ransomware outbreaks and when we see it happens, the very last thing you're going to see as part of an attack is that piece of ransomware being dropped. And if you're waiting until that very last point in time to detect and respond to it, it's a little bit late in the attack. So typically what an attacker is going to do at this point in time is going to try and get some way around it or see what can I do now to enable me to drop that piece of ransomware. So in this case, what they tried to do was to disable Defender for Endpoint. And there are multiple different ways and techniques that they tried to do this. Some are using PowerShell, some are using different applications to try and disable Defender for Endpoint. Now, one thing that you'll see from the Microsoft stack, again, the inbuilt protection that it's going to give you, and that's assuming that this is implemented and configured properly, is there's tamper protection. So tamper protection is a feature has existed for a while, and what that allows you to do is to stop any attacker trying to disable Defender for Endpoint, disable some of the features for Defender for Endpoint, no matter what way they try to do it. As I said, either through PowerShell, through the command line, or any other means necessary. So a very, very powerful kind of capability. So the attacker in this case, and they're at the stage called execution, command, and control. So I should have mentioned along the top are kind of the typical attack stages that you see an attacker work through. So as they work through that, like initial reconnaissance to access to try and get command and control. At this point in time, they were saying, I've done as much as I can do with this machine, but what else can I do in the organization? Let me go and find, are there any devices out there that maybe aren't uploaded or aren't onboarded to Defender for Endpoint or to whatever the antivirus was? In this case, it was Defender for Endpoint. And lo and behold, they happened to find about 5 unmanaged devices. So what's key here is deployment of the various tools and technologies. You may not have them in the first place. So in this case, the attacker about an hour or so later was able to discover and find 5 machines that they were actually able to encrypt remotely. So what we're looking at here is they're doing some lateral movement. Now, they started with a bridgehead. They're now trying to move throughout the organization to see what kind of damage can happen. Also looking as they move through the organization, doing things like privilege escalation. And Johnny mentioned about identity being one of the major ways in and attacks in. In fact, one thing that we say sometimes is, the bad guys don't hack into your organization, they pretty much log in, right? So they log in through having compromised username and password, bypassing things like multi-factor authentication, which you get to see on a lot nowadays. Rob did mention around that adversary in the middle attack, whereby, yes, a good control is to have multi-factor authentication, but it is not an undefeatable control on its own. So in this case here, try to move laterally throughout the organization. Defender had a look at that, and another component kicked in called Defender for Identity. Again, the Defender for Identity is a command that looked and see what did it see. So in this case, and all this happens automatically, even irrespective of a SOC being in place. So with the Defender for Identity, it spotted, I've seen this account. It's actually logged in successfully onto this machine. It's then traversed through the organization and deployed software on these other machines. What this account is doing doesn't look right to me. So what I need to do is automatically contain that account. So that's the first thing that it does. So Defender for Identity has a look and contains that account, so stops that account, even though it's a successful log on, from being able to laterally move to other parts of the organization to deploy more ransomware payloads. And also, as well as locking out that account and disabling that account from acting, looks to see what devices has that account been on, and let's contain those devices as well. So you can see that's a very, very powerful piece of technology. So in this case, it revokes things like tokens, which have been stolen by the attacker. In this case, with Defender for Identity, it has contained the user and also isolated those machines. So now those machines are no good to an attacker. For us as defenders, we can get access to those machines. We can pull log files back. We can do digital forensics and instant response on those machines to understand exactly what's happened. Kind of the key point here is, sometimes people miss that, is if you do notice an attacker within the organization and you disable the account, if this session is already in operation, disabling that account is not going to stop that attacker, because they've already had that session token. That token doesn't get disabled when the account gets disabled. But using some very specific tools from Microsoft, and for example, in this case, that Defender for Identity, we have that ability to revoke those tokens which are in operation, disable the account, and quarantine or contain those machines. A lot of this happens automatically, and it happens automatically if it's been configured properly and the right policies are in place. But as well as that, what we do see is, if you notice, there's an amount of time between that 11:15 and 11:28, or between 9:48 and 11:28, where there's some activity happening in the environment, which, although the products look to contain it, there are also some other actions that we could do as defenders to protect against that. So one thing, for example, is if we have an NXDR platform, we'll talk about what that is in a second, but not only are we looking at some of the Defender technologies, we're also looking at a SIEM platform, which allows us to take log and event files from absolutely everywhere, correlate them, and then our analysts are looking and seeing what these threats are and say, actually, I've seen this happen. Maybe I can go and action something quicker than the automated response within the organization. So just in summary, the Microsoft tools and a lot of tools people would have in place already, just not using to the appropriate degree, can do a lot of this in terms of defense against these attacks. But the tools on their own are not right, are not enough. If A, they're not configured properly, and B, we don't have the right staffing to manage them, particularly in the case of an incident, to be able to have those human eyes on as well, to be able to see, yes, something that's raised as an alert that maybe machine intelligence or artificial intelligence can't pick up on, that human eyes and human intervention can. So that's what an attack looks like. I mean, what are the lessons? I've kind of gone through them there. What are kind of the lessons that we learn from this? The very first one, make yourself smaller in the first place. Know what your attack surface is and make it a whole lot smaller. So do things like using attack surface management, external vulnerability assessments or penetration tests, or that continual external attack surface management. Understand what your attack surface looks like. Understanding is only one thing, then you need to go and mitigate. And typically that's one of two things. One, it's one of three things. One, it's It's ensuring that any devices that are out there are patched appropriately. And secondly, that the devices are configured appropriately and locked down, that services aren't exposed, etc. And the last piece, which I suppose permeates all what we look at when we talk about cybersecurity, is that human element, that human firewall, that human awareness and training to ensure that particularly in terms of identity attacks, that your staff are trained and are able to recognize what's happening. The second piece is protect and detect. So absolutely, you need to have enough protection mechanisms in place to make yourself that smaller target again. But you also got to figure out that achieving 100% protection is pretty much impossible. Or maybe if it's not impossible, it's just financially very difficult to do. So what's key is that not only you're able to protect against these attacks, but you're also able to detect and respond to them as well. To go back to that previous example, or examples where we see something like ransomware, when that last piece of ransomware is dropped, or when all hell breaks out, when you see a ransomware outbreak in the organization, that's typically happened between 8 and probably 30 days after the attacker has initially gained access. So there has been that ability, or that time frame, that 20 or 30 days, where you could have detected other activities before that piece of ransomware gets dropped. Other activities within the organization to see, actually, this is something that's happening here. This doesn't look right. How can I stop this earlier on in the attack kill chain rather than later on? And then the last piece is understanding that's going to happen. How can you respond and recover? How can you respond and recover in a way that limits the damage that's going to happen, that you understand what the damage is, what the costs are going to be, and you limit that. So you must have the ability to do things. But first of all, it's to contain the threat. In that previous example, we saw containment was a number of things. It was isolating the devices and containing the user, but also in terms of recovery, understand what the root cause was, and then have the recovery plans in place to affect recovery to bring your organization back to where it should be. Here's another view of what that attack or an attack looks like. Again, don't worry about the detail of it, but across the top is that attack chain from reconnaissance all the way to impact. There's a couple of more steps in here in the one that we've shown a second ago. But what's kind of key is that at each of these stages, there are solutions within a Microsoft stack and backed up by a SOC offering. There are solutions which are going to help you detect what's happening, detect from happening in the first place, predict it's going to happen through threat intelligence, and then be able to detect and respond. So we'll talk about things from the reconnaissance side around that cyber threat intelligence, that external vulnerability management, that external attack surface management. Then when attack is proceeding, it's things like vulnerability management, understand internally, because up to now we just talked about it externally, but internally what your attack surface looks like. So yeah, externally might be fine, but if a threat actor gets access internally, what is it they can do at that point in time? Maybe there's unpatched machines internally or poorly configured machines internally. You might have a standard Windows 10 build, but maybe all machines aren't built to that standard. So what are the tools and technologies? Yes, vulnerability management, configuration management, understand what you look like, but also that detect and respond piece. At the very, very basic level, it's endpoint detect and respond. If you could do nothing else and do just do one thing, you start at the endpoint. But as you can see here, attacks just don't happen on the endpoint. There's lots of other technologies involved, from email, from networking, from cloud services. So the managed X, and the X is the extended detect and respond. Let's have a look beyond just the endpoint to build up that fuller picture. So again, as you move through the various stages and tactics and techniques that an attacker could use, from that access to that initial execution, to try and move throughout the organization, to do things like exfiltration, and then final impact, such as in this case, it was dropping a different type of ransomware, is that you have the ability to detect what's happening at each of these stages. So nowadays we see a lot of double and triple extortion threats. So just encrypting your environment is not good enough anymore from an attacker's perspective. And even if they do it, they realize that lots of organizations have the ability to recover, backups, immutable backups, securely located elsewhere. They can rebuild the environment. Yeah, there might be a bit of downtime, but being able to detect things like data exfiltration, where some confidential data, it could be PII data, it could be business confidential data, gets exfiltrated, can you detect that that's happening and stop that in real time as well? So what do these services look like? So in terms of, I suppose, the Echo SOC, and I just look very specifically now around services around the Microsoft stack, using Defender, the XDR set of Defender products, and Sentinel as a SIEM. What is that going to look like? We're building off this premise that protection's not enough. You've got to be able to detect and respond. I think we've established that premise already. So it's going to start off with this. You're going to have an environment. Everyone has an environment. What are you going to have? You're going to have identities. You're going to have people. You're going to have infrastructure, both networking and security. You're going to have applications. They may be on-premise. They might be cloud. It could be hybrid. It could be multi-cloud. That's typically what we see nowadays. You're going to have endpoints. Traditionally, we're in office locations. Now we're remote working and teleworking are elsewhere. So when you look at this, there's two ways of looking at this. First of all, from an attacker's perspective, these are all ways into the environment. I can compromise users. I can compromise infrastructure. You can get in through suppliers or through cloud services. If an endpoint is protected properly, I can look at that. From a defender's perspective, we look at the same set of technology and say, this is a really good, rich source of environment where we can get information around what's happening. So we can get log data and event data, we can get telemetry from these devices. It's going to help us understand what's happening. And really what's kind of key is not just getting logs and telemetry from one data, it's from one location or one service. It's getting that overall picture. So we can build up that kind of comprehensive picture to say, I've seen this happening on this identity, something else happened on the endpoint. This also happened just beforehand in email and email scanning. Anyone who does on their own probably don't mean a whole lot, but when I build up that picture and I look at them all together, that looks like it's an indication of a threat. So what is it that we can do? In this case, in the Microsoft world, yeah, if we just take, as I said a second ago, let's look at the endpoint first of all, because why is the endpoint important? The ransomware sits on an endpoint. Access, as we saw in our previous attack happens through the endpoint. The endpoint is used to exfiltrate data, and the endpoint is used to move around the organization. So the endpoint, in some ways, is a very, very critical piece. Endpoint protection, as we talked about a second ago, your traditional antivirus, it's fine, but it doesn't look at that behavioral piece. So an endpoint detect and respond. So it goes beyond what you might see with traditional endpoint protection and layers in this detection and response, which is more behavioral-based view of the world. So we looked at that previous attack. It was a behavioral piece that indicated to the XDR platform that I need to contain the user and stop these machines, rather than a signature from a file or something that happened. It was behavior and not a piece of technology that indicated something to happen. If we build up the picture more, and we said, so we want to take it more than just endpoints, we want to take the rest of those services. That's why we use things like the SIEM platform. And in the Microsoft world, their SIEM is Sentinel, is a top right Gartner Magic Quadrant SIEM, integrates really well with the Defender product. So we talk about Defender XDR. We just look at Defender on its own, the endpoint, that's MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. But I did mention some other technologies that are in there. So if we have Office 365, we're going to have Defender for 365. We're going to have things you could have in place Defenders for identity. You could have Defenders for cloud apps. So the multiple different products within that stable that together are called Defender XDR. Again, you build all this together, you use threat intelligence. And for a lot of people right now, some of these components may actually have in place. They may not have them configured properly, or may not be using it properly. In this, yeah, you're going to talk about things like artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to help, as we saw in that kind of attack disruption chain we saw a second ago. What's key as well is this is just technology, but particularly when we look at behavioral pieces, that you have a team of SOC analysts that can understand what these tools are telling us to enable us to effective response. So the response is what? Well, it depends on what the threat is. So sometimes it can be an insider threat. An insider threat is just not malicious insiders. It is someone that has legitimately gained access or illegitimately gained access, but seen internally as a successful logout. So in that previous example, yeah, the attacker was in the environment. They logged on from one machine to the next machine. It wasn't a failed logon. It wasn't an attempted logon. It's a successful logon. So when we look at things like that insider threat, it's not just malicious usage. And what we're also looking at is not just failed logons. We're also looking at successful logons. We're looking at them at a time and a context which is outside what we would normally expect. So for example, if that happened to be an administrator account logging at 3 o'clock in the morning, that looks suspicious. Maybe if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not as suspicious. Then on the bottom, so that's the insider threat, which is also related to external threats. And then also what's really key is that advanced threat detection based on not just insider, but also overall external attacks and threats as well. So yeah, can we see something that's happening in the mail system before it even gets onto an endpoint or desktop? Can we see something that's happening within a remote access solution or a VPN solution or zero best from desktop or whatever happens to be that users are using? So overall, that's what the service looks like. The set of technologies, in this case, it's leveraging what you have in Microsoft. It's a team of SOC analysts who understand what's happening and can affect change. And then there's also those tools which will help affect change really quickly, which are built into the Microsoft products, but also tools where there are times where you need an analyst to actually make a determination themselves. So what does Defender for XDR look like? What does Microsoft look like? I kind of mentioned it a second ago. I suppose it's probably better to focus on what it does rather than the components that are inside it. So along the top there, top right, you can see prevent, detect, investigate, and respond. Those are kind of the major steps that we talked about. Yeah, first of all, it's key to preventing. Prevention is all about making sure you have the right tools and technologies. One, but two, making sure that you configure properly. They're not misconfigured and that they're used and applied properly. Detect means having those Defender products, those set of XDR products, which are taking those signals that Microsoft Sentinel SIEM, which is collating all those signals to be able to detect what's happening from the noise of all those events and alerts that are out there, and has that proper analytics to have a look at it. Thirdly, the ability to investigate. So for a long time, we'll see things such as false positives, where it looks like an attack is happening, but it isn't really happening. So you need a SOC analytics team, a SOC analysts to be able to interpret what the tools are telling them, and then based on that, do one or two things. Either go back and retune the environment, we're getting a lot of false positives, or activate a response. So the response in some cases can be activated automatically. That example we showed you was part of that. In other cases, it does need that kind of capability from the analyst to go and work with it. Why do we like something like Microsoft Sentinel? It's hard to see there, but on the left-hand side, I know we've talked a lot about the Microsoft world, but we understand that lots of companies exist and use tools, even security tools, outside of the Microsoft space. So it's key then that you're able to integrate and get data from all these other tools too. So right now, I think there's over 500 different integrations that Microsoft Sentinel will have as it brings all its tools in. Yeah, if you're a Microsoft only shop and you happen to have just Microsoft Defender and the XDR set of products and Microsoft Sentinel as a SIEM, it can make it a whole lot easier for you. But recognizing that sometimes there are other products and solutions, you need to be able to look at that. Why else we like something like Microsoft Sentinel and the XDR products? What we found, and we've been dealing with this since it was first released back in 2019, is we can affect security outcomes really quickly. We can get to deploy this really quickly. We can get to integrate it with your environment and get clients up and going with that defended posture very quickly. Yeah, it's not just a one-stop shop. It's something that may evolve over time, but very quickly we can affect a security detect and response component to help clients, as I said, detect and respond to those threats. So I think we have another poll page just to see where people are in terms of licensing. In terms of licensing here, we're talking about I suppose the Microsoft licensing around the various products. So why this poll would be useful, it'll help us to understand kind of what products you have, and then what you have right now that you could be using and you could be leveraging. Yeah, so as I see as it's coming up, yeah, there seems to be a lot of responders with Business Premium, probably due to the size of the organization, some with E3 and some with E5 as well. Robin later on will tell you, we'll talk through those various products, the security SKUs and capabilities that you get with them. So in our world, what is it we can do for you right now? So we built up these tiered set of MXDR products and services based on the Microsoft stack, recognizing that and particularly for some smaller clients, that you have something like 365, you probably don't have Defender for Endpoint or not Business Premium. You might have a different endpoint protection platform. And really what's important to you. Someone tries to compromise my mail system, tries to compromise my users, tries to compromise something that's got to do with identity. That's what this first very, very basic service does. It looks at clients with 365. We take an Office activity, 365 Defender alerts, some Azure activity around identities, and we have a detect and response platform that helps neutralize those threats. So what do? We can do things like we can disable the user, we can force a multi-factor authentication reset or a password reset. For a lot of the identity-based attacks, you're starting nowhere. This is a great place to start. Yeah, characterized by clients. I don't have endpoints, Defender for Endpoint, particularly the EDR component. And this is kind of priced on number of users. It's a very easy entry level in. So if someone wants to get started on this, it's very cost effective as well. Someone wants to get started on this and get started with it straight away. I suppose the next tier of the service is what we call our standard service. So it's everything in essentials, but now we're layering in some of those other Defender products that you may have in place. For example, if you have Business Premium, if you have Defender for Endpoint, E5 license or the P2 license, so we have those EDR capabilities. So what we're saying now is we're not looking just at identities in your Office activity. We're now looking at what's happening on your endpoints. We're also looking at what's happening in some of your other components, maybe Defender for Cloud Apps, as well as Defender for 365. And so what does this mean? Well, the more location of devices or services that we can get data from, then the more we can affect an action on. So in this case, yeah, we could do the password reset and the multi-factor authentication, force that a reset on that. But now we can also do things on the device end. So we can isolate that device as we saw in that previous thing, or we can terminate the process of whatever happens to be on that device. So this is aimed particularly at Microsoft clients who have Defender for Endpoint, Business Premium, or the E5 P2 license. It'll also operate for clients that have other third-party EDR products, and so we recognize that may be in place. I suppose over time, this is where we see clients getting to. A lot of clients would start at this premium level. So what does that mean? It's everything that's in essentials, but also now we're looking at third-party logs. So we're understanding that your environment exists outside of Microsoft. You might have firewalls, you might have third-party other products. Say you're not using 365 email, you're using the different email products for security. So in this case, we're understanding that you have a much greater environment and that we need to build up that comprehensive picture we talked about, that ability to take logs and events in from absolutely everybody else. So again, the difference is now we can affect other actions. Yeah, we can do identity-based actions. Yes, we can do endpoint-based actions. But in this case here, we can also do actions on things like putting rules into firewalls to block access to a particular area, or to stop traffic going from either internally or externally, or between different zones or VLANs internally within an organization. So for us, that's kind of the key takeaway today, is understanding that stack, those three levels of service. Hopefully you'll be able to identify where you think you should fit and where you can move on to that. And I'm just going to hand over to Rob now, just to
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the following slides, provides a comparison between, some of the more common 365 type licensing models, whether that be Business Premium, M365 E3 and E5. And this more just sort of focuses more on the sort of security features, because there's obviously lots and lots of other features in these products around compliance and other measures. So this is more around security. So Business Premium, this is Microsoft's sort of version of the 365 suite, tailored more towards the small to medium businesses up to 300 users, and provides a good level of security features. So from the enterprise levels now, the E licenses. So Paul, yeah. So the E3 here, you can see down the middle, the E3 has similar functionality to Business Premium. So you've got Enter ID Plan 1, conditional access, endpoint detection response. However, one of the sort of things to highlight there in red, which we've done, is these are actually more of a manual response action under E3. So, you know, typically you could manually run an AV scan or manually isolate a device once you've looked at an alert or an incident within the portals. With E5, if we can just click once more, Paul, we can see that with the E5 suite, you get a whole heap more of features, amongst which is, you know, automatic investigations and automatic response, you know, which is a pretty critical difference between the two. And on top of that, also you get advanced threat hunting, 6 months searchable data, the vulnerability management stuff that Paul had mentioned earlier, advanced threat analytics. So, you know, for both licenses, E3 and E5, an alert is created, but the response in E3 is manual. You know, this is a sort of fundamental thing that needs to be understood here, whereas the E5 is automated. Yeah, so Entra ID. So for your ID, so with E5 you'll get an Entra ID Plan 2 as well, which again gives you you know, some very powerful extra features there, you know, around risk-based conditional access, Defender for Identity, PIM, and then ID protection, insider risk. So, you know, there's significant differences between these, obviously different costs. What you can also do though is you can get various licensing add-ons. So just looking at that Entra Plan ID under the E5, you could top up if you're just an E3 user, you can top that up by just buying a Entra ID Plan 2. And also something certainly worth looking at for the E3 users is to get the E5 security add-on, which, you know, gives you all the extra stuff in green for Defender for Endpoint 2, Plan 2. Yeah, so it gives you Defender for Office Plan 1 and 2, Entra ID Plan 2, and Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. So quite a lot of extras there, and I think it's only about £9 a month. You know, so I think the key message from this slide really is, you know, to ensure you've optimized your Microsoft licensing from a security perspective, and that if you're not E5, then understand, you know, your add-on pack options to increase, you know, your security capability, your security posture, and obviously the features that you can go in and configure and receive alerts from, and, you know, and log in from. Okay, Paul. Okay, so you know, by utilizing your Microsoft licensing and using a managed XDR solution for Microsoft Defender and Sentinel provides, you know, a number of key benefits to increasing your overall security posture. You know, these solutions can be complex and they're ever changing. We know Microsoft changes the names of these things pretty regular basis, but obviously there's a lot of new features, a lot of new options that don't necessarily get deployed in the correct manner. So with this, you know, you can bridge your IT skills gap with the Echo security team's expertise to be an extension of your team as well. So, you know, with the Echo security team's experience of the current activities that they look after with clients within the SOC already, you know, their expertise in Defender and Sentinel to give you like an optimized and a best practice setup that can be configured and deployed. You can reduce your overall security operating costs by using a managed MDR solution for Microsoft Defender. And I think, you know, Sentinel is becoming the sort of go-to SIEM platform now. You know, all of the vendors now know they need to create Sentinel plugins because everybody's sort of going to this. And what this does is it avoids the vendor lock-in, you know, is because the Sentinel service is actually your data. It's under your subscription. So if you was to change providers, all you're actually doing is changing the service wrapper rather than the data location. Whereas other sort of third-party SOC providers will use other SIEM platforms. But then if you ever wanted to move away from that, trying to get your historical data back at the end of the contract is very difficult, or you'll end up with like gigabytes and gigabytes of CSVs that you need to try and import somewhere. And then one of the, you know, the great features here is free ingestion. You know, by using the Microsoft tool sets, you know, the Defender tool sets, you get free ingestion. You know, so many of the Microsoft products So Business Premium, E3, E5, what we've spoken about, receive free data grant per user to ingest the Entra ID sign-in and audit logs, the Purview information protection logs, and then also any Azure activity, Office 365 logs, and then the alerts from Defender products like Identity, Endpoint, and Cloud Apps. So it's a great way of bringing everything out of the Microsoft Tenancy Portal, which again can be in lots of different portals, different log bases everywhere, and it's bringing it into one centralized event logging system to be able to see all that in one place. And then obviously have all of the SOAR capabilities that sit within Sentinel to react to incidents. Okay.
Just one more slide there, Paul, if you don't mind. Right, guys, I think we're on time, right? But just let me give you one point in terms of this slide. Essentially, just the final point in terms of everything there is that this there's a rapid deployment available here that Echo have. We have a proven methodology. We have our use case libraries and our SOPs available to deploy to customers based on experience delivering this elsewhere. You know, it may sound complex, but it's not. We have whittled it down to we could have this up and running in less than 4 weeks, depending on the demand of the customer. So, look, happy to discuss this further if anyone offline, if anyone has any questions. But at this point, I'll just pass you on to Kieran to close off. Thank you.
So I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for attending this webinar. A quick reminder, this session will be recorded and an email will be sent out to you, not only with the recording, but also the PowerPoint slides, so you can revisit anytime you wish. I was thinking of kind of going through a Q&A session, but it seems there are no questions available right now, but I have come up with a couple of questions to ask John. I'm just going to start off with 2 questions, and if anyone in the audience does have any questions, feel free to pop it in. So the first question that I had for Johnny and Paul and Rob is, what are the main challenges of drawbacks you've encountered when managing like a multiple best-of-breed security solution within your organization? So what I mean by that is, let's say that particular organization is using the likes of Okta and CrowdStrike. How does that compare to this Microsoft suite?
Yeah. Let me take that one initially. That's a great question. I think I may have alluded to it even in the presentation that sometimes you might have multiple technologies. One thing that we see is if you have multiple different technologies all trying to feed into a SIEM platform, particularly when endpoint and SIEM are directly integrated, there is that delay between those signals getting from your endpoint solution. So, for example, we could integrate CrowdStrike into Sentinel. There is that delay in getting those logs across. Whereas when you look at the Defender XDR, and that example I actually showed there, that even happens pre-Sentinel. So because it's a single source, and Microsoft are the primary source of the logs events and the technology to action change, we can action change a whole lot quicker and we can remediate a whole lot quicker. So that's the key, one of the key differentiators between having a one integrated solution and a solution built up from multiple vendors.
Thanks for that, Paul. And I've got one final question before I completely wrap it up, and that is, how does Echo stay up to date with all these cyber threats and vulnerabilities that are happening? And how can we ensure that our SOC services is able to essentially accommodate for those changes in the market?
I'm sure I can take that at just a high level, Kieran. So just to things right, look at the slide in front of you. We have integrated threat intelligence, and the threat intelligence functions support our wider team. It's integrated with all our services to make sure that our team are up to date with what's happening and what global trends, what threat actors are there affecting different industries. Secondly, we have a significant learning and development program internally to ensure that our analysts are certified and based on the tooling to be able to provide the skills and expertise to our customers. And then just the final element part of that is, look, we're constantly updating our use case libraries in line with different threat actors. We help enhance our SOC against MITRE ATT&CK to ensure that we increase our coverage for our customers. And it's an ongoing process. It doesn't remain static.
All right. Thank you both for answering those questions. As there are no questions, I'm going to wrap it up. thank you all again for joining. And as mentioned before, the resources will be sent out to you via email, so keep your eyes peeled. And one of our sales representatives will be reaching out to you in case you want to have additional discussions around this particular topic. But yeah, thanks again and have a great rest of your day all.